At a long mahogany table in Lusaka, the family sat under glittering chandeliers, their smiles stiff and polite. Plates of steaming food were passed around, laughter bouncing lightly off the walls, the kind of laughter that hides cracks no one dares mention. Just when the room felt warm and safe, the parents leaned forward, their faces cold as stone, and dropped words heavier than silence. They announced that their own child, sitting right there among them, was no longer part of the family. The sound cut sharper than a knife. Forks slipped from hands and clattered onto plates. Laughter died mid-breath. Cousins stared wide-eyed, uncles bent close to whisper, and a sister smirked as if she had been waiting for this moment. Betrayal sat on the table hotter than the meal itself, filling the air like smoke that choked the room. The child's face stayed calm, but inside, the world tilted. It was not just rejection. It was theater, staged in front of every relative, meant to humiliate, to brand them as nothing. Yet in that heavy silence, something stronger stirred, a quiet fire that promised this would not be the ending, but only the beginning. The parents did not stop at just saying their child was no longer part of the family. They turned it into a cruel show. Every word they spoke was chosen to cut deeper, and every pause was filled with stares that pressed like weights. The cousins leaned back in their chairs, smirking as if they had just been given permission to laugh at someone's misery. The uncles whispered among themselves, shaking their heads, pretending to pity but secretly enjoying the drama. The sister, with a grin that looked almost rehearsed, sat taller, proud that she was still worthy, while her sibling was being pushed out like garbage. The air in the room turned heavy, every second dragging on like punishment. It was not just rejection, it was public humiliation served in front of those who should have been allies. But the child who was the target of all this cruelty did not break. They sat still, their face calm, their eyes steady, giving nothing away. No tears, no begging, no anger. What the family did not know was that behind those calm eyes lived a secret none of them could imagine. They thought they were humiliating someone weak, someone powerless, someone who had failed to meet their high standards. But the truth was very different. This child had already built a life outside these walls, far away from the reach of this family's control. While they were being mocked as a disgrace, their mind quietly replayed boardroom meetings, investments made at the perfect time, and late nights spent building something real. While their relatives laughed at them, they thought about loyal friends and staff who respected them, about business partners who trusted their vision, about money multiplying in accounts the family knew nothing about. The smirks around the table only fueled the fire inside. The whispers of uncles, the gloating of the sister, the cutting words of the parents, all of it became noise that no longer mattered. Because the child sitting there in silence was not the failure everyone thought. They were the hidden storm. The family believed they were winning, but they were blind to the power already shifting in secret. And so, as every cruel smile and every sharp word tried to stab deeper, the child stayed calm, almost serene. For them, this dinner was no longer a moment of shame. It was a stage where the family unknowingly revealed their true faces, while the one being humiliated carried the sweetest secret of all, that everything the family thought they controlled, everything they valued, was already slipping out of their hands. The real performance was not the one the parents staged at the table, it was the silent strength of the child, who knew the game was about to turn, and that when it did, no one at that table would ever laugh again. The room was still buzzing with whispers and fake laughter when the child finally moved. But instead of shouting or defending themselves, they pushed their chair back slowly. The sound of the chair's legs sliding across the polished floor echoed louder than any scream could. Everyone looked up, waiting for a fight, waiting for tears, waiting for a final desperate plea. But none of that came. The child stood tall, adjusted their jacket, and looked around the table one last time. Their parents' faces were stiff with pride, the cousins smirked, the sister glowed with satisfaction, and the uncles leaned closer, eager to hear the explosion they thought was coming. But there was no explosion. There was only silence. The child did not touch the food again, did not open their mouth, and did not give the family the show they wanted. Instead, they simply turned and began walking toward the door. Each step sounded steady and calm, not rushed, not hesitant. It was the kind of silence that makes people uncomfortable, the kind of silence that makes even the strongest feel small. The servants froze where they stood, their eyes wide. Even they understood that this was not weakness, it was power. No door was slammed, no angry words were thrown back. Just the quiet, steady exit. And that silence hit harder than any tantrum could have. It made the cousins' smirks falter. It made the uncles stop whispering mid-sentence. It made the sisters' grin tremble for the first time that night. And for the parents, who had expected tears and begging, it left them unsettled. They had stripped their child of the family name in front of everyone, but somehow, it felt like they had lost more than the child did. As the front door opened, the night air swept into the mansion, cool and fresh, breaking the heavy atmosphere left behind at the table. The child stepped out without once looking back. No hesitation, no regret. Just freedom in silence. Behind them, the chandeliers still glowed, the food still steamed, and the laughter tried to return, but it could not. Because the silence that child left behind lingered like a shadow, haunting every corner of the room. The family did not know it, but they had just witnessed the start of something greater than themselves. They thought they had won, that their cruel performance had broken someone forever. But as the child disappeared into the night, the truth was the exact opposite. The power had already shifted. That silence carried more strength than all their mocking words combined. And while the family sat trapped in the mansion with their pride, the one they had cast out was already stepping into a new world where silence was not weakness, but the loudest declaration of freedom. While the family sat back in their chairs, satisfied that they had cut ties with the so-called failure, the truth they did not know was far greater than their imagination could stretch. The child they mocked and humiliated was not weak, not poor, not lost. In secret, away from their judgmental eyes, this child had built an empire. Nights that the family thought were wasted in loneliness were actually spent in front of glowing screens, studying markets, learning codes, building networks. While cousins bragged about expensive cars bought with family money, this child was quietly making investments that doubled and tripled before anyone could notice. While the sister posed for photos and craved attention, this child was signing contracts and closing deals with people who had real power. Every insult at the dinner table became fuel. Every smirk turned into silent motivation. The child poured energy into tech projects, apps that people around the world downloaded, software that big companies paid millions to use. Slowly but surely, accounts grew heavy with wealth. Not borrowed wealth. Not inherited wealth. Real wealth, earned in silence, built with vision, built with patience. By the time the family called them a disgrace, the truth was that this child could buy and sell every property the family owned without blinking. The family believed they had control, that they were the gatekeepers of success. But behind closed doors, their outcast was already flying higher than all of them combined. Business trips disguised as holidays, meetings in glass towers hidden behind simple smiles, bank accounts spread across cities they had never visited, this was the real life the family had no idea existed. If the cousins knew, their smirks would fade instantly. If the uncles knew, their whispers would dry up in their throats. If the sister knew, her proud smile would vanish, replaced with disbelief. And if the parents knew, they would choke on their own pride. Because the child they thought was beneath them now held more money, more power, and more freedom than the entire table put together. The beauty of it all was the secrecy. The family saw only what they wanted to see, a quiet, simple, unremarkable relative who did not compete in their shallow games. They never looked deeper. They never suspected that the one they mocked was the very one who could, with a single phone call, freeze their accounts, stop their businesses, or even take away the roof over their heads. And so while they toasted to their false victory, while they enjoyed their meal thinking they had cut off dead weight, the real power was already shifting. The child who walked away in silence was not walking into darkness, they were walking into a life so bright, so untouchable, that the family would one day bow their heads in shame. What they thought was a loss was in fact the greatest mistake of their lives, because they had just disowned the most powerful person at the table. The night outside was calm, the kind of silence that felt like it was holding its breath for something big to happen. While the family back at the mansion raised their glasses, proud of the cruel scene they had staged, the child they disowned was already on the road. The car glided smoothly through the dark streets, headlights cutting through the quiet night as if showing the way to a new beginning. Only a few loyal staff sat inside, people who had stood by in silence, knowing the truth all along. They did not speak much during the drive. They didn't need to. The hum of the engine, the rhythm of the tires on the road, and the calm breathing of everyone in the car carried a sense of destiny approaching. As they left the city behind, the air grew cooler, fresher, and freer. The mansion with its chandeliers and false smiles was now far away, shrinking in memory with every passing mile. Ahead, the private airstrip near Harare stretched under the night sky like a secret waiting to be revealed. From a distance, the lights on the runway glowed softly, guiding them like stars. And there, waiting under those lights, stood a sleek jet, silver and shining as though it belonged not to Earth but to the future. The car slowed to a stop, and loyal hands rushed to open the door. The child stepped out, no longer carrying the weight of humiliation but standing tall with calm authority. The air smelled of jet fuel and fresh night wind, a mix of power and freedom. The jet's engines were already humming, steady and strong, like a heartbeat calling them forward. It wasn't just a machine, it was a symbol, a key to a new world where betrayal no longer mattered. Behind them, the family was probably laughing, believing they had won, believing they had finally silenced that failure. But at that very same moment, the jet's doors opened with a soft hiss, offering something far greater than the family's approval. This was not an exit, it was an entrance into a higher life. The loyal staff exchanged knowing looks, proud to witness what the rest of the world would only learn too late. Each step toward the jet felt like leaving behind chains. The betrayal at the dinner table became smaller, the cruel smiles weaker, the false pride of the family meaningless. What waited inside the jet was not just comfort and luxury but a future shaped by their own hands, a future where no one could cut them down again. The child paused at the top of the stairs, turned their eyes once more toward the dark horizon, and breathed deeply. The past was behind them, locked in that mansion forever. Ahead was the sky, wide open, ready to carry them to places the family could never reach. The doors closed softly, sealing the promise of a different world, one that belonged entirely to them. Back at the mansion, the family was still clinking their champagne glasses, smiling with satisfaction, believing they had destroyed someone's spirit forever. But far away from their table, on a quiet runway outside Harare, a different sound filled the night. The engines of the sleek jet roared to life, louder and stronger than any insult ever thrown at the child. With a smooth roll forward, the plane picked up speed, its light streaking against the darkness. And then, in a powerful surge, the jet lifted off the ground, leaving behind the city, the pain, and the betrayal. The same streets where they had once been mocked now shrank below, glowing faintly like a map of toys scattered across the earth. Inside the jet, the child sat back in a leather seat, the soft hum of the engines wrapping around them like music. They did not need to shout, did not need to prove anything to the people left behind. The takeoff itself was enough, a silent announcement that they were above everything now. Literally and figuratively. The city that once rejected them was now nothing more than a blur of lights fading under the clouds. What had felt like chains hours ago was now just dust below. At 40,000 feet, freedom stretched wide in every direction. The sky opened like a canvas, endless and unchallenged. No whispers here, no smirks, no fake laughter. Only peace, only power, only the steady reminder that they had risen higher than anyone at that dinner table could ever dream. Each mile upward tasted like revenge, not the kind served with anger but the kind that was sweet, calm, and untouchable. Revenge without a single word spoken. The staff poured a glass of champagne, and as the child lifted it, the reflection of the stars shimmered inside the glass. It was not a toast to the past but to the future. The sound of clinking glasses in the mansion meant nothing compared to the quiet toast made in the sky. Down below, the family thought they had won. Up above, the real victory was happening silently, far beyond their reach. The leather seat embraced them, the jet's lights blinked against the night, and the engines carried them forward like destiny itself. Looking out the window, the child could see the world stretching endlessly, reminding them that their story was no longer tied to one city or one family. They had crossed into a new chapter, one where power was theirs alone. The family could keep their chandeliers, their staged pride, their shallow victory. None of it mattered anymore. What mattered was this moment, the jet slicing through clouds, the stars close enough to touch, and the calm smile of someone who had risen above it all. The sweetest revenge was not shouting at the table. It was leaving it far behind, carried by wings that only true strength could build. Hours after the child's quiet exit, the mansion was still alive with laughter. The parents sat tall, proud of the lesson they had taught. The cousins joked, the uncles whispered with smug smiles, and the sister basked in the glow of being the favorite. They believed the chapter was closed, that the humiliation was final. But while they clinked glasses and congratulated themselves, a single email was making its way to every inbox in the house. Phones buzzed, tablets lit up, laptops pinged. At first, no one cared. But then the subject line caught their eyes. It carried the child's name. The same name they had just erased from their family. One by one, they opened it. And silence filled the room like a storm cloud. The words were simple but heavy enough to crush their pride. The child they had mocked, shamed, and disowned was now revealed as the legal owner of the company that had been paying for their lifestyle all these years. Every luxury around them. The mansion, the cars, the servants, the very food on the table, had been tied to that company. And now, with a single stroke of a pen, the ownership had shifted completely. The email included documents, sealed and signed, leaving no room for doubt. Bank accounts once filled with ease now lay in the child's control. Businesses the uncles bragged about were under new management. Properties the parents flaunted as their legacy were already transferred. All of it tied to one signature, one decision, one person, the very child they had cast out. Their arrogance had blinded them so badly that they did not see the ground crumbling beneath their own feet. The cousins, who had smirked earlier, now sat pale and speechless. The sister's smile vanished, her face twisting as the reality sank in. The uncles stopped whispering, their mouths dry, their hands shaking as they scrolled through the attachments. And the parents, who had orchestrated the cruel dinner performance, now felt the sting of true defeat. The power they thought they owned had slipped from their grasp in the quietest, most devastating way. It wasn't just about money. It was about control. The child they had mocked now decided which accounts stayed open, which businesses continued, and which properties remained theirs. With a few clicks, they could strip everything away. And the family knew it. The mansion that once felt grand now seemed fragile, like a castle built on sand. Back in the jet, far above the clouds, the child sat calmly, untouched by the chaos erupting at the dinner table. They didn't need to hear the cries or see the panic to know it was happening. The email was enough. Power had shifted completely. The family's victory had lasted only a few hours, but the child's revenge would last a lifetime. And the sweetest part was this: it was done without shouting, without anger. Just quiet truth, delivered straight to their inbox. The jet cut smoothly through the night sky, its engines humming like a song of freedom. Inside, the child who had been cast out only hours ago sat in a wide leather chair, calm and unbothered. A glass of champagne sparkled in their hand, the golden bubbles rising slowly as if celebrating along with them. Around them were loyal friends and trusted staff, people who had stood by silently while the family mocked and betrayed. Now those same people smiled with quiet pride, knowing they were part of something far greater than the shallow banquet left behind. The memory of being disowned at the dinner table already felt distant, almost like a bad play staged by bitter actors. The cruel smirks, the whispers, the fake pride, all of it was shrinking in the rear view of life, just like the city lights far below. What replaced it was the steady roar of the engines, the soft glow of the cabin lights, and the undeniable truth that real success doesn't need to prove itself. It simply rises above. As the jet soared higher, the child took another slow sip, their eyes drifting to the window where stars shone brighter than any chandelier. In that moment, they understood something powerful: revenge doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes the final laugh is not at the table, but far away from it, surrounded by freedom, wealth, and people who truly matter. The family could keep their empty pride. Up here in the sky, the child had something better, the sweet taste of victory carried on the wings of their own private jet.